We know that React manages and displays data. Let's talk a little bit about what that means conceptually. We'll go over some of the concepts and jargon that you'll experience when working with React and reading through the documentation. First of all, React helps to visualize data. When we're creating web pages or working with CMSs that generate pages for us, in a sense, we're just displaying data. Our data might be products in a store, news articles, photographs, and other artwork, but in a sense, it's all data. And of course, at a lower level, we all work with web forms, which have their own data as well, the value in those fields. React is a user interface library that makes it easier to manage the data that's displayed in a user interface. In other words, visualizing the data. One way that React tries to make this easier is by its declarative nature. Often when we're building up interactive pages with unassisted JavaScript, jQuery, or what have you, we tie functions to events that say a button just got clicked or something happened on this field. These functions then collect all the bits of the page they need to fulfill whatever the interaction is that we've specified. They'll go and grab form data, DOM elements, and so on. Then we specify what we want to happen with those collected bits using code that's very tied to the state of the DOM at any point in time. This kind of programming is called imperative because it's basically a series of commands, pretty low levels of implementation, involving specific DOM elements and so forth. It can feel a little bit micromanagey. React works in a way that's called declarative, where you declare or define your components and data and how they interact in response to events at a higher level and in advance. You still assign event handlers and so forth, but their relationships are between high-level components, not between specific DOM elements. And it's managed much more by React than by the particulars of your code. I don't want to make this sound too much like magic. You're definitely still writing your fair share of JavaScript, but React takes away some of the tedium. Before we leave this conceptual area, let's get a little more jargon out of the way. First, state and props. These are the main ways that you define and pass around data in React. We'll get into more detail on this, but basically components can own their own state, and they can pass state to other components via props. One-way data flow refers to the way that data are passed around in React. It's all downhill, from the topmost parent component down through its children. Data don't flow from the children upward. A consequence of this is something called lifting up state, which means taking state data that's defined in one component and moving it up to some parent component. That's a common part of the React workflow when you're figuring out where things should go. It's something you'll often do when you're refactoring. React maintains its own representation of the DOM for the purpose of figuring out what has changed, what needs to be updated on your page in response to those changes. This virtual DOM is one of the main ingredients in React's secret sauce. And then finally, synthetic events. Instead of using standard DOM events, React has a thin wrapper on top of them to minimize compatibility issues and to standardize the way certain events work a bit more than they do in real browsers. They work largely the same, it's just worth knowing that they're a little different. So that's a little bit of the concepts and jargon that you'll see working with React, and especially reading through the documentation.